So, have you ever just kind of sat in class or maybe at work or anything of that nature and just felt like you're trying to concentrate, but your mind is like completely somewhere else? So, for us as students, this tends to happen a lot. Some of us might not admit it, others, might have experienced it or admitted to something similar happening. But what we usually call this is the silent battle. And it's something that pertains to it's something that pertains with our mental health. And it's usually like another form of a mental health battle that a lot of us tend to struggle with, usually in silence, which is the reference of it being the silent battle. So a little bit more about it. Um it basically makes it harder when you're going through the silent battle. It makes it harder for you, especially as a student, to be able to perform the best that you can when it comes to your studies, with no matter if it's your assignments, with homework, maybe concentration in class, trying to pay attention with your notes, or even just trying to study for a test, a midterm, a quiz, or even an exam. So with that being said, sometimes it can just, when you have a lot on your mind, it can just kind of make your, like I said, it can make your performance really, really hard, and make your mind feel pretty heavy. So it's very essential to protect your mental health at all costs in order to make sure that you're learning as much as possible still, and making sure that everything still feels pretty normal. And so, like I said before, a lot of us, we kind of fight that battle, and it's done alone, and it's always in silence, while we're still expected to show up, focus, and succeed. So mental health, it tends to impact your academic performance, and it actually matters like a lot, basically. So the real question with it all is like, you go, okay, so how are we supposed to perform with our minds feeling so heavy? So having the pile of stress, anxiety, depression, and even burnouts, they don't make us just tired, but they can affect how we think, how we remember things, and just simply how we function. So, um, it can, like I said, it can make it harder for us to remember like important notes or previous learned lessons in classes, and just making it hard to learn in general. And that's because your brain is basically going into survival mode, and it's not getting as much of the information, like it's not absorbing as much information as it usually would, in a sense. And so it's like no amount of all-nighters that you pull, or caffeine, or sweets, or candy, or sugar, is not going to fix that, like, at all. So it's important that we make sure that we also are prioritizing our mental health, because what mental health can do, the impact that it can have on our academic performance, it can cause mental exhaustion, which can then put a strain on your grades and then onto your GPA at some point. So some people tend to consider what we go through mentally as just laziness in a way, when in actuality it's you becoming burnt out, overloaded, and also overwhelmed just from everything that's going on with you. So it's important that, you know, you protect the part of you that makes learning possible. So next is the stigma, and pretty much why we stay silent about it. So the problem that a lot of us feel, is that we tend to feel guilty for needing rest or even just needing help. We don't Usually we want to stay silent about the battle due to the fear of being judged, taking over, or even being looked upon, like I said, as weak, quote unquote, by your peers, family, friends, whoever. Um, And even some people tend to say they feel as though like they're being dramatic about it, or even like you're falling behind. But it's important to understand that asking for help isn't a sign of failure. It's actually a sign of strength and self-respect towards yourself. And so it's actually the bravest thing to do. And some people will never admit it that they're not okay. So it doesn't matter if you need to talk to a professor, use campus health resources, or just be honest with like a friend or a family member. It's important to know that, it's something that has to be normalized to understand that you got this. And so there's also that pressure that we get on our back too sometimes, basically from our academics, of just wanting to be able to push through, to continue to do as much work as possible, get through midterms, get through quizzes and tests and everything like that. But it's not that easy at all times. And so what then also tends to happen is you become another student, just kind of falling into the statistics. You become another student who ends up suffering in silence instead of getting the help that's needed. So it just, it kind of sucks, but it's like it's easier said than done, basically. So then the next portion of it all is taking action and how we can start healing. So there are so many resources out there for anyone that's suffering with depression, anxiety, social anxiety, anything of that nature. So one thing that's important when it comes to your mental health, no matter what you're going through, is that you treat your mental health like you would an assignment or a deadline. Take action immediately. Another thing that can be done is basically asking for help. Just simply asking for help. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's from a friend, another peer, a family member, going to your counseling services, even here at Central Carolina Technical College, or even just signing up for therapy. Even checking with your counselor, even if you feel as though nothing might be wrong with you, you just never know. Always, 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 this is very important, and it's the best thing that helps. Always have positive self affirmations for yourself too, so that way if you feel as though nothing is wrong, or you just kind of think there's something wrong, those positive affirmations will still take you a long way, before you know it. Also, it's really important, and this has actually helped me personally, but it's important to also engage in more activities and hobbies that you love, no matter if that's cooking, baking, maybe building Lego sets, um, maybe babysitting, maybe jogging, maybe going to the gym, maybe drawing, just anything, of that type of nature. I would also say, like I said before, it's important to use certain like other resources just outside of like, counseling and stuff like that. But use your important resources such as resting and or counseling services as stated before. Also, it's important to learn to set boundaries with your studies and with work. So when it comes to studying, make sure that if you're like studying for any type of exams, tests, whatever the case may be, make sure you're taking breaks in between. Don't just stare at a screen all day, no matter if that's your computer screen, your iPad, tablet, phone. Make sure you're not staring at a screen the entire time. Take breaks in between, get rest. And also the same thing when it comes to work. If you need to call out of work, call out of work. I know a lot of jobs, um they tend not to offer mental health days because they feel as though that's not really a thing. But hey, if you just need to make an excuse to call out of work and take some time for yourself to get back into who you are. If you're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed or overloaded. And it's also important to practice self-care. Like I said, it doesn't matter if that's exercise, maybe doing different healthy habits such as starting a new diet, trying new foods, maybe trying things gluten free, things of that nature. And it's also important to set your or have mechanisms or whatever as well too, and also setting realistic goals for yourself in the end. And one thing that I think is a great resource and a great action to take is journaling. It does not matter if you're physically handwriting something out in a journal or if you have a journal app, or as I personally use, my notes app, or even my voice memos app, which I just kind of like talk to myself to calm myself down. So that one kind of works pretty well too. Another thing I will say too, pouring from an empty cup. So basically what that means of pouring from an empty cup is basically just you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't thrive academically if you're falling apart emotionally. We're not robots. We are human beings. And so with that being said, we need care, support, and balance. So you have to take care of your mind just like you would take care of your dreams, basically. And because without one or the other, we won't survive, basically. So it's important to stop treating mental health like it's a side note or that it's just something that'll pass. Because when it comes to your academic excellence, it starts with emotional clarity. And that's where the quote come in. That's where the quote comes in at saying you can't study through a storm in your mind. Like I said before, as I stated before, take care of your mind like you would your dreams, because sometimes the heaviest things that we carry are invisible. And it's also important that you treat your mental health kind of like a first GPA, because rest is not a reward, it's actually a requirement in order for us to get by. So I've also listed a lot of resources here for anybody if you're seeking for any type of help, any type of just anything. So thankfully with Central Carolina, they with both campuses, the Sumter campus and the Kershaw, I think the Kershaw County campus, I think they both offer a lot of counseling services with a list of phone numbers that of anybody that you can reach out to from different resources to help. There's also the South Carolina Hopes line, which is an anonymous line for those who are struggling with depression and or anxiety and other mental health challenges, and their number is listed right there. There's also the Mental Health America of South Carolina. They provide information on anything pertaining to mental health. They offer support groups and other resources. Then there's the 988 Lifeline, which aids anybody who just needs to talk to somebody, and your conversations, they actually remain confidential. And there's also the South Carolina Community Mental Health Centers, and they provide state funded outpatient mental health care just within South Carolina. So if there's any questions, comments, or concerns, I will gladly answer or anything of that nature. But thank you for listening to my speech today. Hope you enjoyed.